Hello, and welcome to the Fighting Moose podcast. I'm your host and narrator, Jason Hendrickson. This is a podcast where I retell stories, some fictional and some historical, that can be enjoyed by people of all ages. Today, we read a story about Buster Bear. Now, before you get too excited, I have to tell you, this is not the same Buster Bear we have read about in the past. This story is about Buster the Big Brown Bear, and it comes to us from the book Buster the Big Brown Bear, written by George Ethelbert Walsh. My original intention was to read a historical story about Henry Hudson. However, when I thought about it, I figured my son would not want a story about an explorer. He would want a story about Buster Bear since he asks about it all the time. Well, since I couldn't find any other ones written by our friend Mr. Burgess, I searched and I found Mr. Walsh. I don't know if I have access to any of his other books, and if my CEO, John, approves of the story, I may have to see what else is out there. Until then, thank you for listening to the podcast. Your patronage is greatly appreciated. Now, let's turn to today's story. I hope you enjoy. Let's begin.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
When Buster was a cub. In the North Woods, where Buster was born, a wide river tinkles merrily over stones that are so white you'd mistake them for snowballs if you were not careful and began pelting each other with them. The birches hanging over the water look like white sticks of peppermint candy, except in the spring of the year when they blossom out in green leaves, and then they make you think of fairyland, where everything is painted the colors of the rainbow. The rocks that slope up from the bank of the river are dented and broken as if some giant in the past had smashed them with his hammer, cracking some and punching deep holes in the others. It was in one of these holes or caves that Buster was born. He didn't mind the hard, rocky floor of his bed a bit, nor did he mind the darkness, nor the cold winds that swept through the open doorway. He was so well protected by his thick, furry coat that he didn't need a soft bed on which to take his nap. A big stone made a nice pillow for his head, and he rather liked the hard floor for a bed when he curled up to go to sleep. Buster was an only child. He didn't know what a brother or sister was like, and so he didn't miss either. He had his mother, who was good enough for him, and when he was old enough to crawl out on the rocks in front of his home, he would spend hours and hours there playing with her in the bright sunshine. Sometimes Mother Bear had to leave him while she went off in the woods to get something to eat. At such times, she made Buster stay in the cave. "You mustn't show yourself on the rock, Buster," she cautioned. "Until you hear me call you, I won't be gone long." Buster was a dutiful little cub, and he accepted his mother's commands without asking why or wherefore. Perhaps that was because he was too young to understand, or because his mother was very strict with her only child. When he was very young, so young that he could hardly see at all, his mother used to tell him what to do, and then gently but firmly make him do it, using her big hairy paws to enforce obedience. These early lessons were never forgotten, and Buster got in the habit of minding his mother just as naturally as a tree grows straight when trained upright to a stake. But Buster grew curious as he got older, and one day when his mother was going away he asked, "Why can't I play in front until you come back?" "Because," replied Mother Bear, "Loop the lynx might come along and eat you up." "Who is Loop the lynx?" asked Buster, turning very pale, for he had a wholesome dread of being eaten up. "Never mind, dear. You stay inside until I come back." That was a mighty argument of Mother Bear's to make her child obey. He was so afraid of Loop the Lynx that he never dared to poke his nose out of the cave when his mother was away. And sometimes the temptation to do it was very strong, for as he grew bigger and stronger, the sunshine had a great fascination for him. Nothing in the world seemed pleasanter than to roll around on the rocks outside, blinking at the warm sun and smelling the odors of the sweet flowers. It was springtime then, and the woods were full of the song of birds and the drone of busy insects. It made one wish to be outdoors all the time. "You must be careful today, Buster," his mother said to him one morning, "and stay inside the cave. I heard Loop the Lynx hunting around here last night. I don't like him. He's a rough, brutal fellow, and nearly always up to some mischief. I hate to leave you a minute today, but I must." Buster kept his promise and remained inside all the morning, playing with his tail and the few leaves the wind blew in the cave. Toward noon, however, he got tired of this and also very hungry. When a bear is hungry, he becomes very bold and will do things that would never occur to him at other times. Buster sniffed in all the corners of the cave for a bite of something good to eat, but there was nothing more digestible than rocks and stones. Then he crept nearer the entrance, venturing a little closer every moment. A streak of sunlight played on the rocks in front of him, and it so fascinated him that he began trying to catch it with his little paws. He had it, then lost it, and then sprang for it again. But the sunlight danced around and never stayed caught. In the midst of this game of tag with the sunlight, Buster heard a noise outside. It sounded like some animal scuffing heavily over the rocks, and the little fellow was so sure it was his mother that he ran out to greet her. But what a surprise met him! Instead of Mother Bear, there stood Loop the Lynx, crouching and sniffing, with his long tail swishing back and forth, making a noise like a nutmeg grater. Buster had never seen Loop the Lynx before, but nobody had to tell him now. He recognized him instantly. His first thought was to run back in the dark cave. Loop had a great dread of being caught in the cave by Mother Bear. If he had to fight with a full-grown bear, he preferred to be out in the open where he could spring in a tree if knocked over by a big paw. So he resorted to cunning to induce Buster to come out further. "Don't be afraid, Buster," he said pleasantly. "I'm not going to hurt you. Your mother was delayed in the woods, and she sent me here to watch the mouth of the cave so no harm would come to you." Buster was surprised at this information, and he stopped to look at Loop. He didn't like his face, but if his mother sent him, it must be all right. "I was watching you play with that sunbeam," Loop continued, lying down with his two paws in front of him. "I used to do that when I was young, but I'm too old now. I can't jump around as I used to. Now let me see if you can catch that sunbeam." Buster was less afraid than ever, and he wanted to show Loop how spry he was. "I can catch it if I want to," he said boastfully. "I don't believe you can. Now let's see you do it. If you do, I'll tell your mother when she returns what a spry youngster you are." Buster, swelling with pride and ambition, made a dart for the flickering sunbeam. At the same time, Loop leaped into the air and landed right at the mouth of the cave, with Buster on the outside. He was cut off from retreat, and Loop leered so cruelly at him that a spasm of fear ran down his spine. He wished now that he hadn't disobeyed his mother, but it was too late, and he set up a little cry of terror. What Loop the Lynx did to him, and how Buster escaped to plunge into more adventures, will be told in the next story.
Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for for mankind.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fighting Moose podcast. Please join us next time as we read another exciting story. Today's music was provided by the artist Analog by Nature, and the audio clips were provided from NASA. For more information to download and or listen to audio or materials from all our recordings, or to contact us, please visit www.thefightingmoose.com, or you can follow the links in the show notes. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a review wherever you get your podcast or on iTunes, and tell a friend. Thank you for your patronage, and as always, try and do a random act of kindness every day.
Mission complete, Houston. After serving the world for over 30 years, the space shuttle turned its place in history and it's come to a final stop.